Feel quite grounded after that. I had a nice little meditative walk this morning just to shake the jitters out. Feels good.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the TripSitting Podcast, where we explore what it means to be human. Now, I don't really typically, dive into what I do here, what the name TripSitting is, why I do any of this, but I just feel called to do that, so I'm going to. But think of me as your guide or trip sitter, for example. Um, Meaning that my job here is as the host of this podcast is just to hold space for my guests to allow the conversation to flow in order for us to have a really authentic conversation and really just relate to each other as two human beings, two individuals who don't know each other's life stories. We know maybe a little bit about each other, but this podcast is an opportunity for us to dive into those real parts and really get into who we are as people, what makes us tick, what makes us go, and that's why I love doing this. So thank you all for coming and joining me on this ride as we dive into what the human experience is. This week we have on Kyle Hurd, who is an amazing human. And I hope you all enjoy. And before we dive in, make sure that you are subscribed to the TripSitting Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. And then also, if you wouldn't mind giving this show a rating, so that way we can get in front of more viewers. And make sure that you're following us on Instagram and TikTok at tripsitting.blog. Thanks again so much for coming, and I hope you guys enjoy. How long have you lived in Hawaii again?
Been here about 4.5 years.
4.5 years. And you moved there pretty much on a whim, right?
Well, guided by spirit, truly. I mean, it's in the strangest of ways. Like, yeah, it was just a signal from above. Like, okay, you guys need to move on to the next phase. So, got to get out of Texas. And we had been on that path anyway. Since we came back from New Zealand in 2009, I was just in Texas waiting for the next thing. Like, it was a placeholder. So, and it was a rough patch for sure. The entire time back in Texas. My mom actually got sick as soon as we came back from New Zealand. My mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and it turns out that she had actually something way more aggressive than Parkinson's, unfortunately. And it took about 5 years of her continuously declining before she finally just crossed over to the other side. But it was all happening at the right time. Like the New Zealand thing kind of fell apart for us just in time for us to get back to Texas
What were you doing in New Zealand?
just living. Yeah, we just moved. We went there on our honeymoon, and I was blown away by the country and the people. And we were there 2 weeks, and in the second week, I was like, why don't we just move here? Just out of the blue, like I just want to be here. I don't want to leave, And my wife was open enough to say, yeah, let's give it a try. And we were young enough and crazy enough to make it happen. So it was quite the process to get there. And then the actual living there was really magical for me, but it wasn't for my wife. It was actually very hard for her, very hard to settle in, very hard to feel comfortable, make friends, feel like she was part of the community. And so, I'm a surfer, and in New Zealand everybody surfs, and it's just the bro culture is so strong there. And I just was like immediately in with 30 of my best friends, joined the local longboard club and surfing competitively and going fishing with the mates, and just it was pretty epic. But we had opposite experiences, and we didn't really expect that when we made the move. We thought, it's an experiment. It's either going to work for both of us or it's not. We didn't really consider the scenario of it working amazingly for one of us and terribly for the other one. So
yeah.
so my wife fell into a deep depression there, and then she actually got Lyme disease while she was there, and that was the impetus to have to leave. We had to get out, and that was kind of her spirit saying, okay, this is not working. I'm not leaving on my own, so something's got to happen to get me out of here. And that was her escape route. So so that was a difficult few years of trying to find treatment for Lyme, and going back to Texas. The year we got back to Texas was one of the hottest summers on record, like 90 days above 100 degrees, no rain. And yeah, that was tough because New Zealand, obviously, the temperate climate there is so friendly, so perfect, like California type weather. So
Hmm.
yeah, so it was a rough transition back,
Yeah.
and then,
How long?
yeah,
How long were you in New Zealand for?
I was there for 3 years.
Okay, got it. So it's not like you were there for honestly too long,
Yeah,
but enough to make a difference. I mean, it's kind of funny that you said that was sort of like your wife's way, like the of spirit saying like, okay, like we need to find a way to actually get out of here for her.
yeah,
And when things like that happen, so I mean, I'm curious, do you now look back on that? Obviously Lyme disease is something that pretty much stays with you for the rest of your life, but
yeah, for
looking
sure.
back on it, is it something that you or her is now almost a little grateful for?
In its own way, yeah, definitely. For me, the New Zealand thing, after I came back to Texas, it felt like an unmitigated disaster, because I was living in paradise and very happy and very healthy, and my wife was miserable. It was like, wait, these two things shouldn't go together. So,
Hmm.
yeah, so it was quite the challenge. But in retrospect, it was the lessons. The lessons were certainly very strong there, and what it really allowed me to do was to get out of my comfort zone, moving away from Texas, and going to an entirely unknown country, and finding friends, and finding work, and finding meaning. And we bought property, and we like had a house near the coast, and it was like it was great. Everything was great. So we did a lot in our 3 years there. We lived like it was like a whole life in three
Hmm.
years, and
Yeah.
yeah, so obviously, like coming back to Texas was quite the shock. Moving back in with mom and dad, coming back with our tails tucked between our legs, like I don't know what's next. So, and then my mom getting sick, and then going through that, and that was, yeah, that was the thing that really set me into the deepest depression I've ever experienced. I was not ready for my mom to leave, and the worst thing was that initially in the first year of her diagnosis, she began having trouble speaking, and so we couldn't really communicate for this last few years of her life, and I had a hard time. I could not sit with that. It just, yeah, I feel like I kind of kept my distance because I felt like if we couldn't converse, then I didn't know how to interact with her.
Hmm.
So I went down the classic route of alcohol and drugs and all the things to annihilate my feelings.
Yeah.
And yeah, it didn't go well, as
Hmm.
it never does. It always escalates. And yeah, I ended up 2015. Yeah, wrecked my car and blacked out and could have killed people. And that was my wake up. That was the last time I ever drank alcohol or took any sort of pharmaceutical drugs. So
Wow.
yeah, so that was a big turning point for me in my life.
Were psychedelics already a part of your life before then?
Yeah, but only as a youth.
Yeah.
I had my first LSD experience was at 14 or so, and it was a powerful, overwhelming experience, which I was not prepared for. But after that, it took me about a year before I even tried anything like that again. And then I
Hmm.
started buying acid by the sheet, and I started taking it as often as I could, which is generally every 3 to 4 days. Because you can't take acid back to back, or you just don't have the experience. It just
Hmm.
your body, your brain needs time to reset. So I had a good year of just basically weekly LSD trips,
Hmm.
and they were not intentionally. There were no intentions around them.
Yeah.
It was just to experience the world from a different perspective, which was an intention unto itself. I had
Yeah.
a really good friend, Ted, and it was me and Ted, and we would drop our acid and go drive around Houston and just see what happened, see what turned up, what came up, where the party was, where the action was, or just we drove around 610 Loop. There's a loop road that goes around Houston. We drove around 610 Loop for about 4 hours,
Hmm.
going around, seeing downtown, seeing the Astrodome. There's Astro World. There's
Yeah.
downtown. It was the funniest thing. Listening to like Mexican radio, because we can pick up Mexican radio stations in Texas.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah. So the experiences with Ted were really pretty amazing. Like, again, there was no real intention set. It was just us hanging out, having fun, getting up to hijinks. At
Are
one
you
point,
still are you still friends with Ted?
no, sad
Okay.
story. Yeah, he was another. Yeah, I want to say he was. the battles, the cocaine wars of the '80s. It took him
Hmm.
down. He ended up he ended up actually getting busted, and he ratted out on his supplier, and then he got disappeared by the witness protection program.
Damn.
Yeah,
Holy
so
shit.
yeah, so that was kind of sad. I wish, I'd love to see where he is today. I'd love to say hi to him, but yeah, that was 30 years ago. So
That's insane. Holy shit.
yeah, Houston was rough in the '80s, early '90s. Houston was a rough spot. Like there was just a lot of bad drugs flowing in, and a lot of chaos and misery. So
Did
um,
you ever end up going down that route too? The cocaine and
I
just
did.
being fucking crazy.
Yeah, I had my experiences with that substance. I always knew from the moment I did it, I knew that it was not the right thing, but
Yeah.
it only lends itself to more of the same with that particular chemical.
Hmm.
And yeah, so I had that many, many nights of like, okay, this is my last line, and then I'm going to go to sleep and go to work. And of course, I would always go to work without sleeping, and I look like shit. And I see pictures of myself from that era, and I'm just all waxy and just horrible looking. And I'm like, what was I even thinking? But
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the life of the psychonaut, right? Is we're sort of stretching our consciousness in every way possible and experimenting with everything we can get our hands on.
Yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
mean,
I always say, I mean, I don't think there's inherently such thing as a bad drug, but
yeah,
there is certain energy within drugs that if you don't know what you're doing, like if you don't really understand what the drug is or your intention behind using the drug,
mm,
you can get yourself into bad situations. Like that's
yeah,
when you just start abusing the drug. But like, I mean, the drug itself isn't making you abuse it.
yeah. The drug
The
is a
drug,
nurse.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like the drug's just there, but the drug kind of, I think, can show you things within yourself that you then might not want to let go of, because you like that feeling, you like the dopamine, you like
Yeah.
whatever it is, or it's because you hate yourself so much and you're
Mhm.
addicted to that feeling of just hating yourself,
Yeah.
which people are. Like, I don't say that as a joke. Like, I mean,
No,
I
that's
think
true.
people, as much as I think people don't want to admit it, people love suffering. Like, people are
Absolutely.
so attached to their suffering and attached to like a victim mentality that, like,
Yeah.
oh, this is my life, this is me type thing, that they crave that and they don't know who they are without it.
Yeah. And there's certainly a lot of substances that will happily meet you in that place and keep
Yep.
you there. Yeah, I think cocaine's one of the things. But I mean, I would also say that with cocaine in a group setting, I've had pretty awesome experiences with people, like real
Hmm.
feelings of empathy and sort of deeper connection. But the downside is the next day it feels like it all evaporates,
Yeah.
and there's no integration. There's no like, oh, remember that thing we talked about last night? Like, no, I don't remember any of this stuff, So, yeah, and it gets weird. It gets you into some weird places. It's definitely gotten me into being near people that I do not want to have anything to do with. I mean,
Yeah.
at one point in Houston, I surreptitiously, I knew the guy my guy was getting stuff from, and so I went to the trailer park and knocked on the door and nearly got myself killed because I was just desperate,
Yeah.
and it was like, what was I doing at that moment? Like, oh my God,
Hmm.
like these things, like I just think about all these waypoints in my life. Like this could have been a leaping off point. This could have been the end, and what a sorry end, dying in a trailer park, like in some suburb of Houston. So, but no, I always knew in my mind, I always had that moral compass that said, Kyle, this is wrong. Kyle, this is wrong. Kyle, this is
Hmm.
wrong. And it's, the classic angel on the shoulder, devil on the shoulder. And
Hmm.
which voice are you going to listen to? And, like sometimes they're both offering good advice. So you
Hmm.
kind of go back and forth. So, yeah. So like, honestly, for me with psychedelics, the time that it all changed was around 2017, 2018. And that's a friend of ours in Texas said, there's a group coming from Brazil to do ayahuasca ceremonies here in Texas. Would you like to join? And it was like, yes.
Hmm.
What is it? Yes.
So, I
I
mean,
want
what
to join.
was what was that period of your life between 2015, your mom passing away, um and 2017 when you did ayahuasca?
Yeah, that was really interesting because I had quit alcohol successfully and I was really proud of myself for just saying enough is enough. And I didn't go to AA, I didn't receive any support. I just simply made the internal decision at that point to quit. And it just made sense because the writing had been on the wall. This was not the first car I crashed. Tell me, believe me, like there's been a lot of carnage in the past. So yeah, that was kind of the final wake up call, and I was really proud of myself for being able to have the will to just say no. And especially living in Austin, Texas, which is like the alcohol center of the world, like every single event has free liquor and free beer, and it's just all around drinking. Like that's just part of the culture there.
It's part of the
So
culture everywhere, man.
yeah, that's
I
humanity.
mean, like all over the world. Like, I'd love to be able to say like, oh, it's American culture. Like, no, it's
Mm-hmm.
everywhere. I mean,
Yeah, go to the UK, see how they
yeah,
drink.
it's really really wild
Yeah,
how insanely popular alcohol is. Like,
it is.
and just how people don't view that as taking a drug. If I
Yeah.
were to ask people drinking alcohol, like, do you do drugs?
No.
They'd probably all unanimously say no.
Yeah, that's just normal. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is just so interesting.
Yeah. So I think, I mean, honestly, looking back on it now that I'm thinking about it, a support group would have been amazing at that time because as I was coming out of the shadows of alcohol, and not, I mean, let me just say, I was also using Adderall and Valium all together.
Hmm.
Like drink, take the Adderall and go drink all night, and then take the
Well,
Valium
you
and
got to have your uppers to go with your downers, so you're not getting
exactly.
down too much. Yeah,
Just like Elvis, I was running like Elvis, like a pill for this and a pill for that, and snort this and snort that, and yeah, it was insanity. So yeah, a support group would have been great. Coming off alcohol, it was a lot of things started coming up, a lot of anger and a lot of just feelings of, I mean, a lot of feelings of self hatred, self loathing, and I was running a business at the time, a motorcycle and scooter repair business, and so I was kind of working by myself in this shop all day in this pretty intense environment. Surrounded by like fuel and toxic smells, and in this weird part of Austin where there was this like old building that was a bunch of just garages that had people doing various things.
Hmm.
There were other motorcycle repair shops there, but also there was like the guy next to me was like a meth dealer, and it was just prostitutes, and people would pull in the parking lot and then shoot up and pass out, and it was pretty interesting scene.
So a lot of
Right,
weird energy.
very dark energy for sure, and
Yeah.
it got into me. That dark energy definitely got soaked in really well. And so from the period of 2015 to 2018, I just was getting increasingly depressed
Yeah.
and feeling increasingly hopeless. And strangely, like I was running my business in a way where all my clients were super happy and stoked. I put myself out there to do the best thing for everyone else and never ever thought about myself and never took care of myself.
Hmm.
But if anyone was unhappy with anything I did, I would do everything possible to make them happy. And yeah, so I built actually a great business with any given day I'd have 12 or 15 bikes in that shop and people coming in, people calling. And so it was great. Like it was super busy. I worked on, I mean, I feel like most of the people's bikes that I worked on were people I really liked, people that could have been friends, like it was just
Yeah.
that situation. So, and no one knew that I was suffering, like no
Hmm.
one knew. I was just hiding it and pretending. And at the time, I was increasingly having anger outbursts as well, which just only solo. Generally, I would try to never let anybody see me doing it, but
Hmm.
I was just a mess. I mean, I was throwing tools at the wall and just punching things, and oh my god, like it just I had this super intense like situation where if everything didn't go exactly the way I thought it was going to go, I would just freak out.
Yeah.
Like if conditions weren't perfect, I would freak out. And yeah, and you know how it is in life. Life is inherently messy, and there is no perfect. And so yeah,
You
it's these
can't
impossible.
control anything. It's
Yeah,
the you gotta let go of control. But like, when you've
absolutely.
been, would you consider yourself to be somebody who tried to control things like early on in life?
In my own way, for sure.
Yeah.
I think for me, it was more expectations than control. I always had expectations of how things were going to go.
Hmm.
And, that's, I always say like expectations are basically the road to misery because things generally don't meet your expectations. And oftentimes they're better, sometimes they're worse. But in general, you can never really project forward what type of experience you're going to have.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
And
it
you
was all,
also never know whether the way something turns out, whether or not, down the road, something that you think is bad right now could end up being the best thing that's ever happened to you.
yeah. And then the other thing is like, yeah, what is bad and what is good? Like, there isn't really. I mean, that's just a label we apply to things. So, but there's morality and these other things that seem a little bit more fixed. But of
Hmm.
course, when you look at it, when you pull all the way out and look at it from the universal standpoint, it's all just things. Like there is no good, there is no bad. It's all part of the universe as its own consciousness expressing and experiencing itself. So yeah, so that's a tricky thing now, especially because there's so much bad news going around. There's so much pain and suffering in the world, as there's always been. But right now, with the way the media is narrowly focusing on the few awful things that happen every day, it's being shoved in our faces even more than ever. So
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
so
hard. I mean, you have to. I mean, this is something that I'm still trying to do a better job of. But like, as consumers now, just with the way social media works and everything, like we have to really make an effort to consciously consume
yeah,
news and consume media, because like if you're just allowing the algorithms to take over and the media outlets to take over, like you're just being shoved with negative things just constantly, and
yeah,
like you're now going to view the world through that negative lens of like there's all these bad things happening, there's all these atrocities, like there's nothing we can do to save ourselves. So like we have to be conscious consumers.
yeah. Yeah, I always think of it as that, like those little pinhole cameras that people make to view the eclipses. It's like
Hmm.
we kind of look at the world through this pinhole camera, and so we only get to see this smallest slice.
Hmm.
I mean, think about the visible light spectrum. If you've ever looked at a chart of the visible light spectrum, it's a two-dimensional line of what we're seeing, and the rest
Yeah.
is the entire reality of it. And the colors, like birds, there's some birds that see red colors that we can't even comprehend. So
Hmm.
I find that really amazing, and that's obviously the key with psychedelics is um, on 3 hits of acid, you're going to see all the stuff you normally don't see, and it can be super overwhelming.
Hmm.
I mean, seeing things down to a cellular level, and it could be so overwhelming. But if you can really have the chance to take the wider view and just spend some time with it, it's truly amazing, and you can never unsee it. That's the beauty
Yeah.
of it. You can never
one of
unsee it.
the one of the most like powerful thoughts that I have anytime that I'm on LSD specifically, just because I think it's the most visual for me. But like,
Yeah.
it's what if life is always like this, and
Mm-hmm.
when I'm sober, then that's when I'm not seeing it. Like
Mm-hmm.
this is how life actually is,
I think there's some
and
truth
then
to that.
when I'm sober, that's when I'm trying to view things again through that narrow pinhole, because it's easier, it's more efficient. And like here's the thing,
Yeah.
like it's a great thought, but like if I woke up every single day and live my life as if I were on acid, that's fucking exhausting. Like
Yeah.
there's so much information coming at you, but like, acid and psychedelics in general, they open you up to see all of those things that normally you're just filtering out, because it's more efficient to do it that way.
Yeah.
The reason why time feels like it's taking so long is because on psychedelics, like you're so present in the moment, because I can hear the 12 different conversations happening over there. I could see that squirrel moving over there. I could see all the different lights that normally I can't see, because it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter that I'm seeing all those lights. So it feels like, there's all these things happening, but like those are always happening. It's just our mind blocks it out because it's usually just
Mm.
not important.
Yeah. Yeah. And so getting back to that era for me, that after my mom passed away, and actually my mom died on October 9th, and then my father-in-law died on October 13th by his own hand. So it was a rough week for
Oh
both
my
me and my,
God.
yeah. And it was like, at the time, it was just like, I was kind of just numb already. And then, yeah, the other thing happened, and I was just like, okay, well, there's something else to focus on. So yeah, that again, I was kind of in that time frame, was just increasingly depressed and running my business and just miserable every day, and just didn't know what to do. And then in 20, I guess it was early 2018, the guy that ran the motorcycle shop 3 doors down from me stopped taking his meds and killed himself. So it was like, wow, this seems like it's just getting closer. Like this chaos is just getting closer to me. And he was a peer. He was a very challenging person, but he was definitely one of my peers, and he was actually kind of a mentor to me as well. So
Hmm.
he was a crusty guy that was real grumpy, but when you kind of got in there to the inside, had a heart of gold, and it just tore me apart.
Everyone does.
Yeah, totally.
I think we all want to love and be loved, but it's
Yeah,
the stories that we tell ourselves that,
yeah,
about our identities and who we are, that we don't allow ourselves to feel it.
yeah. And he was decades down the path of pharmaceutical antidepressants, which I just I was actually pushed in that direction when I was a teenager, and I said no. And somehow I was able to make the decision, which I'm really glad I
Yeah,
did.
yeah. I was gonna be like, usually it's pretty rare for a teenager to be able to
Yeah,
decide that.
Yeah, my parents just raised me in a different kind of way. They gave me a lot more freedom than I probably ever should have had. And so I
Hmm.
took full advantage of it.
Well, you were taking LSD every weekend when you were 15, so I get that.
Yeah, yeah. So I was definitely going my own way, but still being supported as well.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was really the realization I had when I turned 18. I stopped enjoying acid because I began to have responsibilities. And
Yeah.
previous to that, everything was taken care of. I was still living with my parents, you know, like
Hmm.
it was like I was like, this is so cool. I can just go crazy with this stuff, and like I know I'm safe. I know I'm held. I know I'm protected.
Yeah.
And as soon as my parents actually moved to Connecticut and I stayed in Houston and I was on my own and I began having some really dark experiences with LSD.
Hmm.
Um, One session where I had convinced myself that I was dying, and I just like I made all the logic of like, yes, this girl you were with and you have AIDS now, and congratulations, you're dying. And I was like, I don't want, I'm not ready to die. And I was trying to get my friends to take me to the hospital, and they were like, if we take you to the hospital, it's not going to be a good scene. And I was
Yeah.
like, yeah, yeah, you're right. And I figured it out. But yeah, that was pretty much the end of those experiences. After that, I had several just dark, heavy experiences. And you know how when you're feeling bad, that's one thing. But when you're feeling bad and there's a psychedelic involved, you're able to just screw down right into the deepest, worst part of it and the
Hmm.
most painful part. And it feels, somehow it feels, I feel like psychedelics in general give you like a sense of like, this is reality. Whatever I'm seeing right now, this is reality. And
Hmm.
it's not always, unfortunately. Like, there's a lot of delusions and there's a lot of tricks and a lot of things that you're going to see. But yeah, there's some sort of deep feeling that I often have, especially with psilocybin. I feel like there's an experience I have when the peak is starting to come
Hmm.
on, and I'm like, oh no, here it goes. And it's kind of like that going over the cliff on the roller coaster. Like you
Yeah.
don't know what's at the bottom, and you're like,
Uh-huh.
okay, and you better just settle in for the ride because otherwise it's gonna be bumpy, like
Yeah.
it's
Again,
gonna
that
be ugly. But the
that
thing is, nothing
goes
that,
back to not trying to control everything. Like,
yeah.
just letting go of that, and letting whatever happens happen.
Yeah, I mean, my realization is that it's the control is what hurts. It's when you're hanging on, that's what hurts.
Hmm.
And when you actually really let go, that's where the healing starts to happen.
Hmm.
And interestingly, like I began cultivating mushrooms around 2017, and I did, the Terrence McKenna 5 grams. I have a walk-in closet. I had a walk-in closet at my old house,
Hmm.
and so I set up a mattress in the closet, and it had one door, no windows, so it's pitch black, and I had a little fan, and so I set myself up in there. I took 5 grams, and yeah, it was. That was actually right after my friend Joe had died, the motorcycle mechanic, and he came right in, like he came in right there to the session and said, "Hey, man, I'm it's okay, like there was nothing you could have done. There was nothing you could have done because that was the feeling I had when he died. Like there was
Hmm.
something I could have said, there was something I could have done." And he said, "Look, this was on me. This was where I was at." And it was just beautiful. Like it was the first time I really experienced that, where it feels like there's a thin, like a thin sheet of a veil, and you can like push it and push through it, and there's things on the other side. There's solid things on the other side, and Joe was on the other side of that sheet, and I was just like, whoa, man, this is so good. Like this is
Hmm.
exactly what I needed. I needed some form of closure in this situation. Like whenever somebody just checks out like that, it leaves everyone else just in the lurch, and just leaves them just wondering, oh, what could I have said, that one thing? Could I have told you I loved you one more time? Like, is there anything? And yeah, he reassured me that there was nothing I could have done. So that was really beautiful. At
Powerful.
one point, I remember in the session, I rolled off of my little mat and I was on a hardwood floor, sort of face down with the mucus and the tears, and I was like drowning, and I couldn't really get up. I couldn't really move my body, and it was a little bit scary. But I was like, you know what, this is good. I just tried to move the parts that I could, and just like eventually rolled myself over, and yeah, and so I did a lot of those completely unguided ceremonies with no real support. I mean, my wife was on the other side of the door sleeping, so if I really
Hmm.
got into a lurch, she was there.
She was sleeping during this.
Yeah, yeah, because this was middle of the night. Yeah, it's from probably dose at 8 p.m. and peaking from say 11 to 1 or 2, and
Yeah.
yeah, 5 gram a 5 gram mushroom peak is pretty long lasting.
Hmm.
at times. And yeah, and so I had a whole series of these really deep experiences with my own medicine, which there's just no comparison. Like when you grow your own little friends and then you consume them in an intentional way, there is so much healing to be had there.
Yeah.
And yeah, just so many messages that come through. And and yeah, it was interesting that I got to the point where I knew that I was doing good work, but yet I wasn't really integrating in the way that I was keeping the lessons. And
Hmm.
the depression would just come right back, like it would just come right back. And it got to the point where I basically said, okay, this is it. Like let's go, let's check out. Suicide's the way. And yeah, I basically made a plan. I had it all set up. I was like this. I didn't have a date. I just had a time. I had a space, and I had the method. And I was like, what am I doing? And I got a call from one of my customers out of the blue, and it was like when I was at my lowest point, and it just shook me right out of it. I was like, what the fuck? And is this real? Like, am I really stepping towards this?
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a scary moment for sure, because I felt like I wasn't in control anymore of myself. Like I had started this path, and this path was beginning to just take me like a river, like a raging river, like just take me towards it. And yeah,
Hmm.
it was a very dark time. And it was just that one person reaching out that gave me that little wake up call. And then from that point, that was basically when the ayahuasca began calling.
Yeah.
And um, yeah,
So
in
what was
2000,
that experience then like?
yeah, so in 2018, I sat for my first ayahuasca ceremony, and it was just everything that I needed it to be. This was a group, a Brazilian group in the Santo Daime church tradition. So
Hmm.
this involves, like music and dancing and things, like a lot of interactive sort of things in a group of 40 people. So it
A
was
lot. Mhm.
a lot of folks, a lot of energy in that room. In my very first session, my mom came and just laid down with me for like 3 hours, and we just sat and hugged and talked, and it was just so incredibly healing, because I hadn't spoken to my mom in years because she had lost the ability to speak. So
Hmm.
even as she was dying and we were communing, we weren't really able to communicate, and it was everything to me. Like it brought me back. It began to make me realize that I'm here for a reason, and I have a great life. And I couldn't even believe like this. It felt like it was a split personality that was the guy that was trying to kill himself. It
Hmm.
was like, that was not me. Of course that wasn't me, because I love my life, and I have a daughter and a loving wife and a great, just great life. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that first session was pretty gentle, but there was that good 3 hour visitation with mom, and just all the classic, like, DMT visions, and these like cathedrals of just reds and golds, and a lot of, I was a big fan of Alex Gray at the time, and of Tool's music,
Hmm.
and so just like the net of Indra and his images were just going through my head in the most beautiful ways. And yeah, it was fantastic. And so the first ceremony was that, and yeah, it was sitting with mom. The second session was a little bit darker and deeper, and there was like, at one point, the entire room, everyone was purging at the same time, and we were going through this like group, being squeezed through the funnel, of spirit. And it was so incredible. Like, it's so funny, like, describing this to people that have never experienced anything like that, like how
Uh-huh.
different purge styles sound. There's like the squeakers and the screamers, and like the deep dragons, and just so many different people having the same purging experience. And yeah, it's
Hmm.
like, some people think it's or are afraid to purge, afraid to
Yeah.
vomit, but there's something about a good ayahuasca purge that'll set you straight, and
Oh, 100%. It's a very positive experience in the form of ayahuasca, because you're releasing like this stuck
mm-hmm.
energy from your body.
Cleansing.
Like it's exactly like it's actually cleansing you like from the inside out. And and then it's giving you the sense of like you are physically releasing these things from you. Like this is
Yeah.
energy that you could not see before. You can now see the energy physically leaving your body.
Yeah, yeah, and it's the shaman that we worked with actually was just a really amazing guy. He was, basically a Brazilian guy, a little bit younger than me, but he seemed kind of ageless and timeless, sort of had the
Hmm.
look of a native. Like he looked like he just kind of walked out of the rainforest, you know. And um, he had his first ayahuasca experience at 8 because in his village that he grew up, that was just a rite of passage for the kids. You know, everyone experienced it, and it was part of their yearly sort of maintenance, the spiritual maintenance.
Hmm.
So he grew up in a completely different time and place from us. You know, growing up in rural Brazil. And the first thing that he said to me when we did an interview, you know, before the ceremony, and the first thing he said to me was, Kyle, you just need to be genuine. Just be yourself."
Hmm.
And it's, I mean, however many years later now, I think that message is still sinking in. How deep that really was, because as humans, we create so many layers of personality and of the things we wear and the way that we want to show up, and it gets kind of confusing sometimes to find the center. And I think that's what he looked straight into my eyes and saw the center, and he was like, that needs to be shown to the world because you're not showing it to the world right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it was true. I mean, the moment I walked into that first ceremony, I just felt like that was my last lifeline. That was my last string that I was hanging on to. And I was able to experience the ceremonies with my wife, which was also incredible. Like to have that level of support and friendship, and it definitely deepened our relationship quite a bit. For her going into it, she had never taken any psychedelic or any disassociation. She had taken nothing. I mean, she had
Wow.
only experienced drinking wine a couple times in her whole life. So, needless to say, her first session, her first ceremony was pretty challenging,
Yeah.
and she wasn't able to really open up to it. So, she didn't really have the experience. She was able to actually fully block it.
Hmm.
But second ceremony, her everything blew open for her, and she was like riding her unicorn through the space, and
Hmm.
the unicorn was her dad that had just passed away, you know, Gary the unicorn. So it was just like she just had the most amazing experience. And you know, I mean, obviously with her being an intuitive person in general, she actually was able to get deeper than I was in any of my ceremonies. So yeah, the healing was right there, especially in terms of both losing both of our parents in the years before, and
Hmm.
just having a lot of things that we had not examined, a lot of just a lot of deep emotions that we just had not been able to examine.
Yeah.
And the safe space of that ayahuasca container just allows you to go as deep as you can and as deep as you need to, and
For
really
sure.
just fall apart, like to fall apart in front of 40 people that you just met, you know, like
It's
um,
a powerful experience, and also speaks to the importance of making sure that you have good shamans, you have good facilitators, you have a good
yeah.
space.
Oh yeah, because the opposite. I mean, and you could easily be taken advantage of, and things can go very, very wrongly too. So,
Hmm.
yeah. So that really, I mean, that's actually the most challenging thing, is because ayahuasca. You know, you basically, I feel like you need to have the call. It needs to call to you in some way. You can't just choose, oh, I'm going to go do ayahuasca. You know, you go to
100%.
Yellow Pages, and people have obviously had some pretty harsh experiences because they've gone about it in that way. And yeah, what was it really interesting for me too was coming into my first ceremony was having to get off of caffeine and cannabis. At the time when caffeine and cannabis were the two things that were felt like that was the glue that was holding my entire life together. You know, like without these two exogenous substances, I'm not sure if even a human.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that was crazy. Like to get completely raw, to have horrible caffeine headaches, and cannabis withdrawal is no joke too for heavy users. It
Hmm.
is, yeah, it's a challenge. And interestingly enough, I'm going through that same experience right now. I'm reevaluating my relationship with cannabis because it had become a daily thing again in increasingly heavy doses,
Yeah.
and it wasn't really working anymore. You know, it just was
Uh-huh.
like, not really working for me. So I actually
Yeah,
had
it's interesting, like just like a note about cannabis. Like cannabis, I mean, cannabis, tobacco, like again, all of these drugs, like they have incredible healing properties, but
yeah,
when you use them too much, when you then start relying on these substances
yep,
to put you in these states, like that's when they can just turn into detrimental substances that are no longer good for you. So, you know, I do my best to try to like evaluate my relationship with any substance, um on a semi regular basis, because you know it's just important to understand like why am I using this? Like every substance,
Yeah.
it's not just psychedelics that you need to have an intention going into. Like literally, I mean, every time before I drink caffeine, I sit there and think, I'm like, why am I about to drink this right now? Like, is it
Hmm.
to make me feel good? Do I need to stay awake? Like, is it getting me back to normal? Like, it's 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 constantly just evaluating those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Reevaluating. Yeah. And I mean, it gets back to the idea of like, there has to be an intention set with any exogenous substance. And yeah, I think for me, it becomes kind of a compulsion sort of thing. Like
Mm-hmm.
it comes like the beer after work, you get
Yep.
home and first thing you do, fire up that joint, and it's like, I just get locked into those patterns. And I just, yeah, if I'm not enjoying it, it's like, wait, why am I doing this again? Yeah, it definitely feels like for me, I'm still using it to cover up. I'm still kind of using it to hide, and I'm still leveraging my addictive personality into cannabis, which is like, yeah, not ideal.
Mm-hmm.
But as substances go, I mean, cannabis has a smaller dark side, I think, than a lot of the things that we use. But
For sure, but I mean,
still there.
even as you're using it and as you're doing it, like to have that awareness and still at least be semi aware that like, I think this might no longer be good for me. Like that's always the first step. Like
Yeah.
always going to be the first step.
Yep.
And like that's more than a lot of people I think ever truly do.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, cannabis as well has a very introspective quality and a very, especially with edibles, there's a real
Oh God.
challenging quality to it where it's like, oh, are you hiding some bullshit in your system? Well,
Uh-huh.
here it is. Take a look. Take a really good look because it's right
Hmm.
here for you to see. And so that, I mean, I feel like that is one good side of it, but also I feel like there's this like literal like a green cloud you can just hide in. You can just go into that, or a green blanket and just wrap yourself up in that baby and you
Hmm.
don't feel anything, like you just don't feel it. I mean, I have access to some of the best cannabis I've ever seen here in Hawaii, and yeah, it's like I smoke a joint of this stuff, and it in the past, like one hit of this stuff would knock me through the roof, and then I smoke a whole joint, and I'm like, okay, well, I feel something, but I think I just overdid it.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I'm trying to clean my channels back out again, and yeah, I mean, I think the goal for really for any exogenous substance is to help you to find the things inside that means you don't need the exogenous substance anymore. I mean, that's certainly the Buddhist method is just like, it's all within you. So there
Hmm.
is no shortcut to this, what we call enlightenment. It's just a matter of quieting yourself and getting to that space where you can really, really see the long view. So
Those are such wise words. Like I just want to pause for a moment because like the amount of truth in that is I mean it's hard to describe because it simply just is truth. It's not hiding from bullshit. It's not putting your own view of the world on top of things. Like that's
hmm,
just exactly what it is, which is just pure truth. Like everything is already within us. We don't need anything else outside of us external in
yeah,
order to feel whole, to feel like we can do the things we want to do, to feel fully loved. Like there's
yeah,
nothing else outside that we can ever get that's going to get us there. Now psychedelics, other substances, those are tools to help us see that and maybe help us find the path to it, but like that's
definitely.
all it is it's just a tool to help us find that path. It's not giving us the thing, it's helping us find it within ourselves.
Yeah, and I mean, it's what's so interesting about psychedelics is it's kind of hard to become a psychedelic addict. Like it's
Hmm.
not. I just couldn't stop eating mushrooms. I ate them every day. No, it doesn't, because there's diminishing returns. Obviously, you have like this natural limiting valve in your brain where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, you got to slow. If you want to have this experience, you're gonna have to stop.
Yeah.
Ironically, you're gonna have to
Yeah.
stop, wait, and then you can have the experience.
Yeah,
So
and that certainly happens. I go through that all the time when it comes to different psychedelic substances, where sometimes I'm like, I feel like I can do this once every couple weeks, and then other times it's like you're gonna have to stop for an indefinite amount of time until we tell you that you're ready again.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I always plan like at this point in my life, I'm probably 4, 5, 6 times a year. I'm doing a real deep dive
Hmm.
with usually with mushrooms, sometimes with LSD, and
Hmm.
I always plan it around the moon cycles. Like generally, it's on a full moon, but
Hmm.
sometimes full moon energies can get really overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I like to do new moon as well. And we have really dark skies here in Hawaii, so we can see a lot of stars
Yeah.
and see a lot of satellites, which is so bizarre. You're looking up and you just see like little lights moving all across in every which direction, and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
UFO, UFO, UFO. Oh, it's just a satellite. The satellites go in a straight line.
We're like, one of
Yeah.
these has got to be though.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other day we saw we saw the Starlink array, and so that was
Those
20.
are those are crazy. I just saw
Yeah,
that for literally the first time when I was out camping like a month or
yeah.
two ago.
And
Just
I
it's
was like,
literally all these lights moving in a perfect line together, and it's
yeah.
like that's not fucking real.
Hmm. If that's not UFOs, then I don't know what is, you know.
Uh huh.
So, yeah, it's so funny. And I mean, apparently there are people that say that there are lots of UFO sightings here in Hawaii, but
Mm-hmm.
I've never really had that experience, unfortunately. I mean, definitely in psilocybin sessions, I have seen what
Entities.
appears to be UFOs, but I don't know. Like, I'm not gonna scientifically say one way or the other that what I saw was true,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, it's interesting. Let me go back to the story of the night that we found out that we were moving to Hawaii. Was it was the blood moon eclipse in Texas? So this was, you know, a full lunar eclipse where it turns red,
Mm-hmm.
and the eclipse was occurring at around 1:30 in the morning. So I took 4 grams of mushrooms at about 9:30 or 10, hoping to be peaking at the time that the eclipse was occurring. And oh yeah, I was there. And so I'm standing outside in the driveway in my underwear, like looking up at the moon. And my wife walks outside and she's like, "I just got a text from this healer in Australia. She said we're moving to Hawaii." And I was like, "Okay, let's go." I was just ready at that point. I was fully open, and I feel like with eclipses specifically, there's a lot of information that you can have. There's more information to have access to at those times. It's like there's portals that open.
Yeah, it's a portal.
Yeah, and it's so interesting. Like things disappear oftentimes in eclipses, and things reappear.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that was like that was such a deep experience, and it was so beautiful. And I was staring at this eclipse, and all around the moon, I could see what appeared to be tracers of a circuit board. And I was like, oh, yeah, I knew it was a simulation. There it is. The damn thing's a computer. We're in the computer,
Mm-hmm.
just like the movie Tron. Literally, we are in the computer. And I was like, okay, I'm okay with that. Like that's fine. I can experience that. I mean, it doesn't really affect the way that we're living our lives, right? I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
feel like life is oftentimes this kind of unraveling mystery, but you never actually get the answer until the very, very end. And you have to be okay with that. There's no shortcuts in that. So yeah, so that was a wild night. That was a real experience.
And so
And
how soon after that did you then move to Hawaii?
it was about almost exactly a year.
Okay.
So yeah, it took us some time to figure out logistically what we were going to do. We actually put our house on Airbnb because we were considering. We actually had an offer. The crazy thing was, yes, at the same time, we had someone come and offer to buy our house, and our
Mm-hmm.
house was not even for sale.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were like, "Oh, that's interesting." And they offered us a lot of money. Like we were like, "Whoa, that's a lot of money!" But we were like, "Yeah, let's not sell the house because this is just like the move to New Zealand. This move to Hawaii is an experiment. Like, let's see how it goes. We're
Mm-hmm.
not going to commit fully." So we put the house on Airbnb, packed our suitcases, and bought a one-way ticket to Maui. And we did some research before we got here. I found a job. I found the truck I was going to buy. It was it was so easy landing here. I had work in my first week, and I was actually working on a school, which was going to be an outdoor school, like a adventure school for kids. And my daughter started attending the school after we got it going, and I was still there, kind of doing ground stuff. And then, yeah, that whole thing kind of unraveled, unfortunately, because the people that started the school had forgotten to get permits and all the important things you need for a school.
Yeah. I
So
hate it when that happens.
that was an amazing rug pull, but it didn't even phase me, because I was
Yeah.
immediately able to find work elsewhere. I had made all these connections with local carpenters, and that's what I do. I'm a carpenter, so yeah, so it's just been easy since the day we got here. And Hawaii is not an easy place to move to.
Mm-hmm.
If you Google it online, it says, "Yeah, don't move to Hawaii. It's too expensive. You're not going to be able to find a job. The people are mad at you, like all this weird stuff." So yeah, it was. We just had just everything. Just it felt like the bulldozer came, pushed everything out of the way, and the path just was laid out before us. So it's been amazing. I mean, from day one. And yeah, I feel really settled in here. We bought some land, we built a house, we got some. We're growing gardens and growing all kinds of food, and
Grow
it's just
mushrooms.
yep. No, well, not at the moment. I have all these wild ones that grow up around here, but I'm not actually cultivating anything at the moment. I haven't.
Okay.
There's just been too much. I actually built the house, so it's been like I've been working a little bit too much to have any time for hobbies at the moment, besides
Hmm.
surfing. So yeah, so I'm gonna get back into cultivating. But there's literally cows on my block.
Yeah.
Um, so I've got a field over here I can harvest from, and then there's a field on the beach where there's cows that we can harvest from, and there's ayahuasca vine that grows on the block that I live on. So talk
Wow.
about like perfect place, like it's
Yeah.
it's pretty incredible. Um, so yeah, it's been like a dream since we've been here. I mean, it's just felt like it feels like home now. And actually we're going back to Texas this weekend. Going back to Texas for the first time in 4 years. So
Wow.
that's going to be a bit of a shock going back to Austin. Austin's just such a wild town, so
It's
much going on.
changed. It's grown a lot in the last 4 years too.
Yeah, I'm not going to be able to recognize it. So I'm
Yeah.
actually looking forward to it. My dad still lives there. My sister lives there, brother-in-law and nephew. So yeah, we still got family there. So it's going to be good to get back.
Yeah.
But
Well, Kyle, I want to thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for sharing your story and being open and honest just about the journey that's got you here, and it's just really really beautiful, and I'm blessed that we connected, man.
yeah, thank you. I really appreciate this. This has been amazing.
Awesome. This is your first podcast, right?
Very first. Yeah, I've never done anything quite like this. And yeah, I've always been a really sort of introverted kind of guy, and I don't like to
Hmm.
put myself out there. So I feel like this is part of my lesson in this part of my life is I really need to get out there more. I need to talk to people like you and people that share common interests, and we're all just going towards the same goal of just being the best version of ourselves. And I've seen that in you like so much, like watching you go through every experience imaginable, and the pain that you experienced and the joy and the laughter yeah, it's amazing. So I'm really proud of you and what you've done. And yeah, I feel like you're bringing a lot of people out there. You've introduced me to people like Rodolfo Angeli. I love that guy.
Hmm.
I follow him on Instagram now, and I've
Hmm.
got Italian heritage. I love motorcycles. He and I have so many things in common, and I've yet to reach out to him, but I do. I
Reach
feel like
out to him. He would love that.
cool. Yeah, I feel like you're one of those linchpin people, that brings the right people out, and then there's these communities start to happen. So yeah, and yeah, like also you have you're recommending like session or recommending therapy centers, right, for psychedelic medicines. Like you have a
Yeah,
list.
if anyone is interested in going on a retreat to ayahuasca centers, I know of quite a few of them that I would be comfortable like recommending to people. I don't like list them out on a website just because like the whole
Yeah,
idea is like
yeah,
I want it to be a much more personal touch
uh-huh.
before I would even feel comfortable doing that. But yeah, I want people to just have access to the resources to help them. And
Yeah,
so
and the safe
I'm here
places
as
too. Yeah, I
here as
was
kind of a
wondering whether
beacon.
you were aware of a company called Myco Meditations, and they're in Jamaica.
Hmm.
Um, you know them?
Yeah.
Because their founder has an amazing story. I think I listened to Aubrey Marcus podcast with the founder of
Hmm.
Myco Meditations, and that's kind of on my radar in terms of like if when my lottery tickets come in, that's where I'm gonna go
Yeah.
for my guided session because I've never done a guided psilocybin session, but I think it's in
Oh
my future
wow.
because yeah, I feel like I've gone as far as I can with the self guided, and it's about
Hmm.
time to
Yeah,
to work.
once you let somebody else like hold that container and hold that space for you, I think it really does allow you to go so much deeper. And I'm
Yeah,
all for the self-guided journeys too. I
same.
love those, but like I do think there is absolutely more that you can unlock when you are being guided
Yeah.
by people that know what they're doing.
Yep.
Um, but either way, Kyle, thank you
Yeah.
again so much. I'm gonna
Thank
I'm
you.
gonna end it here. You're fucking
Awesome.
amazing. I love you, brother,
Love you too.
and I'm glad that I'm just glad we did this.
Yeah, you're a brave young man.
Thank you, brother. Cheers.
Thanks.
Thank you all for coming and joining me on this journey. Thank you again to Kyle for coming on the podcast and sharing your story. You did fucking awesome, man. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that we connected. That's all she wrote. We'll see you next episode.